Did you know the most popular birth months in the US are August, September, and October? Now, I'm gonna leave it to y'all to contemplate why that might be and to do the math. But anyway, since those months are fast approaching, I thought it would be a good time to share some baby blanket inspiration. I've got my clipboard of notes here, so I can send you guys to the patterns and tutorials that inspired these baby blankets I've made. Let's get into it. This first blanket is the Crochet Blue Stripes Baby Blanket by Daisy Craft Farm. I will link that pattern down in the description. Obviously, mine does not have blue stripes because I went with a different yarn, but let me give you the important details on this blanket and then I'll share my thoughts about the pattern overall. So first up, the yarn I used is Hobby Lobby's Baby Bee Sweet Delight yarn in the color Top of the World. This is a weight 3 acrylic and polyamide yarn, and I used about 1,000 yards for this blanket. Because of the thickness of my yarn, I went with a 5mm hook, and then to finish it off, I added this border that I will briefly talk through here. Essentially, I did this kind of mirror image pattern where I worked a slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, double, treble, and then 3 treble in one space, and then mirror it back the other direction. So treble, double, half, single slip stitch. That creates these nice little arches and shells, and I think sticking with a really simple border works very well for this blanket to really let the texture of the stitches themselves shine. So here are my general thoughts on this baby blanket and this pattern. I didn't stripe the coloration, I just went with a variegated yarn, but I think it looks really cute whether you use a solid color, stripe it, or a variegated yarn like I did. For some reason, I kept messing up a lot when I was making this blanket, and it's kind of silly because the pattern is so simple. It's a 2-row repeat, but for whatever reason, I kept misaligning my stitches where I'd be off and then I'd get to the end of the row, realize I had skipped a stitch or hadn't skipped a stitch I was supposed to. I did a lot of unraveling. With that said, the pattern is not challenging to get the hang of. The instructions are well written. Overall, I thought it was an enjoyable project to work on, except for the single crochet rows. So you have a row of texture followed by a row of single crochet. I just find single crochet stitches very tedious, so if I were to try this pattern in the future, I might play around and instead of doing single crochet stitches, do half double crochet stitches. Not sure how that would turn out, but I think it could be a neat idea to try. Overall, I think this pattern creates a beautiful texture that's a great option for a baby blanket. Blanket number 2 is this Tunisian crochet blanket using the honeycomb stitch, and I followed TL Yarn Craft's tutorial for doing the honeycomb stitch and just made the blanket in my desired size. Here's the quick details on this blanket. I used Hobby Lobby's Bambootiful yarn, which is essentially the exact same thing as Kobu. It's a 50-50 blend of cotton and viscose. This yarn is a weight 3, and I used about 1,000 yards to make the entire project. I'm fairly certain that I used a 5mm crochet hook for this project, and since the texture of the blanket is already so beautiful and appealing, I went with a very basic single crochet border around. I just worked single crochet evenly, and then in the corners I worked 3 single crochet to get me around to the other side. The yarn color that I am using is unfortunately discontinued, but both the Bambootiful line and Lion Brand's Kobu have lots of beautiful colors to choose from. General thoughts on this baby blanket. First, I think the texture is absolutely beautiful. I love it in this yellow, almost honeycomb color. It creates such a beautiful stretch and drape, partly from the yarn itself, partly from the texture. Sometimes Tunisian crochet can weigh a little bit heavy, but this has such nice, lightweight drape and bounce to it. Simply gorgeous. The other thing I love is this pattern looks complicated, but the honeycomb texture is literally just 2 stitches. You only need to know 2 Tunisian crochet stitches to make this, and it's a 2-row repeating pattern, so once you get going, you just keep doing the same thing over and over and create something that looks complex, but is actually simpler than you might expect. Now, I am human, and I unfortunately made a couple mistakes in this project. Of course, now that I'm looking for it, I can't find it. There were a couple areas where I split the yarn, and I just wish that had ended up a little bit neater. This is very nitpicky, of course. And I can't find it now, but there's somewhere where I did the wrong stitch, and it's, you know, the one little section of the honeycomb looks deformed, but that's okay. Overall, I'm very happy with how this project turned out, and it was a very soothing texture to work on. My third blanket is another pattern from Daisy Farm Crafts. This is the Crochet Flower Blanket. Quick details on it, I used Hobby Lobby Spinesse, which unfortunately is a discontinued yarn, but this yarn is a weight 3 viscose and poly blend. You know, they market it as weight 3. I honestly think it's more like a weight 2. And because it's such a fine yarn, I used about 1,400 yards of yarn to make this project. I believe I used a 3.75 millimeter hook, so these stitches were tiny. This thing took me a lot of time to put together. I say a long time, I mean like hours and hours and hours. It probably took me a good month of working on this to get this done. I mean, we're talking multiple 2 to 3 hour crochet marathon sessions before bed and then feeling like I made barely any progress. But it definitely paid off because 1, the texture of this pattern is just so beautiful and delicate. You can see those flower shapes in there. And 2, the lightweight yarn allows for a beautiful drape. It's nice and lightweight, not too thick, not too heavy, and yet it's still cozy and soft. As a quick note, I'm not positive that I entirely followed the pattern accurately. There's a lot of loops that get on the hook, so there was an element of, I think I'm following the pattern correctly, but maybe I've misunderstood it. Either way, I just made sure to keep doing the same thing, and whatever I got, it turned out close enough to what I was going for, and I think it's really beautiful. With this blanket, I did not put a border on it because I just like the really clean edge and letting the simplicity of the blanket really shine and be the star. Next up is blanket number 4, which is the Cobblestone Blanket by Stitchberry blog. I get a lot of my baby yarn on clearance at Hobby Lobby, so this is again a Baby Bee Sweet Delight. Again, the Baby Bee Sweet Delight is a weight 3 yarn, and I used about 1,250 yards for this one because I did make it pretty big and added this fun textured border around it. As far as what I did for the border, I went in a million directions, kept unraveling. I finally settled on this kind of random nestled shells look. I'm not even going to try to talk through because, yeah, it wouldn't make sense in words. Which, on that note, if y'all want me to do a tutorial showing these different baby blanket borders that I used on these specific projects, let me know. They're actually all fairly simple, at least for the way they look. And I think they're all very cute borders, so if y'all are interested in that, let me know in the comments and maybe I can make that happen. So when it comes to the Cobblestone Blanket, I've got to be honest, I found this project so tedious to work on. There are so many single crochet. I'm one of those people, I find the single crochet stitch very tedious, slow going, it makes my hands cramp, I have to take more breaks, I have to wear my compression gloves and do all the things to be able to do a bunch of single crochet. And then the other stitch you use is a treble stitch. So you think, oh, treble, awesome, I'm making progress. No, 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 no. The treble stitch is what creates this super awesome cobblestone pattern. So the treble stitch, instead of getting you a lot of height and surface area, it creates a forward 3D texture. Having said that, it was a very well written pattern, very easy to follow. Again, another one of these just few rows that repeat. And I love that for baby blankets because it means I can watch TV, I can chat with people, I don't have to think, I can just kind of mindlessly work, and it's enjoyable, except that this one was honestly very tedious of a pattern to work on. With that said, I have no regrets on making this blanket because the end result is so beautiful and it's such a fun texture. I have no regrets about making this blanket, but next time if I were to make this pattern again, I would use a larger hook size to speed the process up just a little bit. And for baby blanket number 5, I have this corner to corner Suzette-ish Stitch baby blanket. So the story on this blanket is a few years back I had made a baby blanket using the corner to corner Suzette stitch and I really liked it, wanted to make another one with this yarn. However, I couldn't quite remember how I did it and I couldn't find the pattern. I just knew that the Suzette stitch is a single crochet and double crochet worked in the same spot. So I kind of made up my own variation. I don't think I truly did the Suzette stitch because I want to say the Suzette stitch is a single crochet and double crochet worked into the single crochet stitch. I worked my pair of stitches into the double crochet stitch, which meant that I was really making it up when I did my increases and decreases. I was successful in making it a nice squared off blanket with right angles. There were a couple moments where I'm like, is this gonna work or not? But I got it sorted out, but I was kind of just making it up as I was going along. Now, if you want to do a very similar blanket to this, you can work the wattle stitch in the corner to corner method. I'll link to a tutorial for that down below. The wattle stitch is very similar to the Suzette stitch, except you have a chain space between them, and I believe you work in the chain space for the following row, whereas the Suzette stitch and what I did here doesn't have that chain create space and you work in one of the actual stitches. Now for this blanket, I again use discount yarn because that's when I tend to stock up on yarn for baby blankets. And because it was discounted, it's also discontinued. This is from Hobby Lobby, and this is their soft stitch yarn. I had it in the color oatmeal and then this really pretty orange color. They say it's a weight 4 yarn. To me, it's a weight 5. Like, I used an 8mm crochet hook. I don't ever use an 8mm crochet hook when I'm working with weight 4 yarn, so I would really put this down as a more bulkier weight 5 yarn. It's just a basic acrylic, but it's very soft, and because it's a chunkier yarn, I had to use a lot less yardage. I used about 700 yards of this yarn. For my border, I'm really happy with how it turned out, although it was a bit of a chore getting it to work right. Because of the nature of corner to corner crochet, I wanted to first put a single crochet border around it, so I did about 3 rows of single crochet, and then I went around with shells. The way I did the shells is I did the traditional 5 double crochet in 1 stitch, skip 2 stitches and slip stitch, and keep repeating. And then for the next row I would work the 5 double crochet shell in the slip stitch and work the slip stitch in the middle of the 5 double crochet shell. However, after I did that for 2 rounds, I did not have enough to do a 3rd round of that, so I had to do something a little more open and airy for my final round of this border. So what I did was I kept working a kind of shell pattern, but I did it more open. So I did double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, worked a slip stitch in the middle of my previous shell, and then in the next one I did something similar, but instead of 3 double crochet and 2 chain, I did 3 chain and 2 double crochet. So chain, double crochet, chain, double crochet, chain. That's kind of just the quick rundown. Again, if y'all want a video showing these different borders, be sure to let me know in the comments. Now, as a quick note, if you work on a corner to corner blanket, I'm going to share you my favorite tip of working corner to corner, especially when you have a limited amount of yarn like I did. If you have a limited amount of yarn, it's important to know when you've gone through half of the yarn so you know to start decreasing. The absolute simplest way to do this is to weigh your yarn. If the weight of the yarn you've already crocheted matches the weight of the yarn you have left, it's time to start decreasing. If the weight of the yarn you've already crocheted is more than what you have left, that means you need to undo a little bit because you're going to run out of yarn. And if the amount of yarn you've crocheted is a lot less than the amount of yarn you have left, that means you have a little bit more room to keep going bigger. I'm going to link to a video that has a section that explains more about how yarn yardage and weight relates together, because it's really helpful with projects and making sure you don't run out of yarn. But that's a really good tip for working corner to corner. So those are my 5 baby blankets that I have recently finished. I do have 2 bonus ones, and these are my own patterns. I don't have them up on Etsy yet, but if someone is just absolutely dying to make one of these, let me know in the comments and I can try to prioritize posting those patterns in the near future. I don't have names for these blankets, but I'll give you a look at them. Here is the first one. You can kind of see I have these different squares of texture. I didn't put a border on it because I just really like the simple, clean look to it. And then I have this second blanket, which is a very similar idea in that there's these different squares of texture, just this one has a different texture than the previous blanket. Again, if you guys really want this pattern soon, I can try to get it up on my Etsy store in the near future. Those have been sitting around for a while waiting on me to type up the pattern and get pictures. But one day I will have that available on my Etsy store, and if you want it to happen soon, let me know in the comments and I can try to make that happen. But those are my baby blankets. I hope you are inspired. Let me know down in the comments if you're going to make one of these projects, or if you have a favorite baby blanket that's like your go-to and you just love how it turns out. Share that project down in the comments. Thank y'all for watching, and I hope everyone has a lovely day. Happy crafting!